The Institute of Risk Management South Africa encourages all risk managers to take action and remain vigilant in assessing the evolving situation. Chief Risk Officer at Purple Group is Nicola Comninos, who joins us on the line. Nicola, thank you so much for your time. Just looking at what businesses need to look at now from a desktop point of view in trying to mitigate the impact of load shedding. Where do we start?
Hi, good morning, Cindy. Really lovely to be chatting to you today. I think the key thing for us is just a call to action from the Institute of Risk Management for South Africa and myself being a Chief Risk Officer of one of the smaller businesses in South Africa, Purple Group, which is listed on the JSE. It's critical for us as businesses, all business leaders, not just risk managers, to look at our current plans that we've got in place and look at whether those are going to suffice to make sure that you can carry on with business as usual. So really just important to do a bit of scenario planning if we want to get a little bit more technical, but essentially looking at what you've got in place, whether you've got alternative energy sources, solar, wind, power that you can connect business to, or a supplier that you can engage with, proactively make sure that you've considered those options. And then also think of your own suppliers and whether they themselves can withstand this type of power disruptions, and get feedback from them, get their plans, understand what they can do to make sure that they protect your business and that you can continue with business operations. So those are some of the key things just to think about.
All right, let's just look at scenario planning, and we're probably looking at more well-established businesses that would have the resources, the technical know-how in trying to have an alternative energy source. But when it comes to SMEs or companies that are not necessarily, that don't have that safety cushion or safety net, what alternatives are there for them?
Yeah, Cindy, so that's an important point, actually. And I'm just looking at our own business, Purple Group. We've got Easy Equities within the group, and that's the more familiar business. But essentially, we have decided that we are closing down our permanent offices, and we're now permanently located within a WeWork space. And that helps us as smaller businesses to be able to manage these types of risks, because you end up essentially renting from another organization that has got these types of power supply considerations that they themselves have to then manage for you. So we've got seats in the WeWork businesses, and say as an example, if the Rosebank one were to be down, we can use the Sandton one, and there are a number of these offices across the country. So that's just an example. I'm not promoting that necessarily as a solution. I'm just saying what we've done practically as a small enterprise. And so the other thing that I think is really important is institutes like the Institute of Risk Management of South Africa. These are industry bodies, and the reason we exist, we're a non-profit organization, but we exist in order to collaborate and knowledge sharing. So we've got think tanks and we've got CRO forums, etc., that individuals can join, any business. It doesn't matter your size, public or private sector, and you can join those forums and workshops and engagements with us so that we can go through things like scenario planning. We've got those tools that we make available for free, and we can work through those types of things with any type of business. So it's an open invitation to engage with us. Join some of those forums, especially if you're a smaller business and you don't have a team that can do this type of work. We'll share with you some of the best practice in terms of recovery plans, in terms of what are the things you need to consider, your supply chain, your customers, a communication plan you've got to put in place, and then also just looking at your own strategy in your business and how this potentially impacts your product line, and whether you need to reinvent and think about a different type of product line, especially if you're very energy intense in terms of your supply chain. So organizations like that, collaboration is really critical, and knowledge sharing.
I mean, we're all at risk, obviously, Nicola, in terms of the load shedding, the impact thereof. We've just recently seen protests as well, where people had marched to the megawatt park, the Eskom headquarters. You know, your food spoils, your home appliances don't work as optimally, mobile devices, etc. I've just been home in Guatemala Springs, 3 weeks of not having electricity. I mean, you know, this impacts on the elderly, etc., but even business more so, because we rely on business to create employment. What has been some of the biggest impact for businesses that you have consulted with regards to load shedding?
Yeah, so Cindy, I looked at a survey that was actually conducted it's a recent report by Netbank, where they interviewed about 200 businesses across South Africa. And unfortunately, 83% of those businesses had to reduce their number of staff, especially those that are in the manufacturing space, food supply, beverages, those sorts of elements. 70% of the business owners mentioned that they had to let go of some of their critical staff. Some examples were in the technology team. And on average, only 29% of those businesses had no staff losses, and 5% of those businesses surveyed permanently closed down. So it really is a dire situation, and extremely important for us to put our heads together and be able to think about solution mode. What are the things we can do to further protect the jobs we've already got in the country, but also not contribute more to further higher unemployment rates? Our cost of living is extremely expensive. We're paying more on interest rates, etc. Investor confidence is waning. We're seeing less foreign direct investment in South Africa, and our global competitiveness is dropping. So it's really critical for us to think about how can we mitigate against those business closures, those job losses. And I think in the same vein, it's also important to bear in mind, as frustrating as stage 8 load shedding or any other type of stages might be, the reality is that the load shedding schedule is a risk mitigating factor, and it's a control that's been put in place to protect the national grid, which is really, really vulnerable. So I think the key thing for me is making sure that we create opportunities for business leaders to get together, to strategize, to think about what are those things that we can do to further protect our businesses, what are the alternative sources of energy supply. Can those sectors be potential future sectors that can create more employment? We've got a huge amount of sun energy on the African continent. There's an opportunity for solar on the continent and to supply for the rest of the country. So those are opportunities that we have to focus on, given the real challenging situation we're sitting with at the moment, but really critical for us to put heads together, leverage platforms like the Institute of Risk Management of South Africa and other forums. The Reserve Bank has a whole host of forums that they've put together as well to support businesses.
Nicola,
and I think it's critical at this time.
Thank you so much indeed. That's the Chief Risk Officer at Purple Group. You can look them up. Nicola Comninos saying that they've created an ecosystem and a community for businesses to tap into, especially in these trying times of load shedding. You can go on and look them up there.